Welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, your source of information for living the best years of your life your way. For more than a decade, host Jim Brogan and his expert guests have come together each week to share important news and advice that can impact the lives and well-being of those who are retired and those nearing retirement. Learn about issues like health and fitness, financial planning, Social Security benefits, investment advice, and more. And now, here's the host of More Living, Jim Brogan.
Good morning, East Tennessee, and welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. And, this morning, Mayor Glen Jacobs, Knox County Mayor, has lived in East Tennessee for close to 2 decades now, and he lives in North Knoxville with his wife and 2 daughters. And prior to his political and business careers, as many of you know, Glen Jacobs was famously known around the world as Kane, a wrestling superstar for the WWE. And in August of 2018, so it's been about a year and a half now, he was elected Knox County Mayor. And the transition from entertainment to politics is a familiar path for many, most notably President Ronald Reagan and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And in his first year since taking office, Mayor Jacobs has worked on modifying our economic development plan, passed a budget without any tax increases, and introduced initiatives that positively impact our children. And, from my perspective, things seem to be going really well around here, Knox County and Knoxville. Now, we'll have Knoxville Mayor on here in May about the new budget. Right now, we're going to visit with Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs. Good morning, Mayor Jacobs.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
So you've been in office about a year and a half now.
Old hat at this point.
That's right, yeah.
Seasoned veteran.
How has the experience been so far, and has it met your expectations?
It's been a blast, actually. People say, well, isn't it a hassle and a pain? And I think too often we talk about that aspect. Anything you do, any job you have or any vocation you have, there's always challenges. But I think if you look at them as challenges, it's a lot easier to deal with than you say, well, you have a problem, right? And that's how I try to look at things as obstacles and challenges. And the upside is hopefully you're making a positive impact on your community. You get to meet all the wonderful people out there that are doing great things in our community. You're talking about Knox County, Knoxville doing really well, and I agree with you. And the major reason for that is because we have some great people in our community that are doing wonderful things. So it's been an extremely positive experience. It's probably exceeded my expectations in that respect because, again, you hear about just in government, everybody yells at you all the time and all that stuff. And yeah, that's kind of true. You can't always make everybody happy. But for the most part, it's just been some of the most fun I've actually had in my life doing anything.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Now, you went from the public life of being a wrestling superstar to private business, successful businessman, now back into public life. What has that transition been like? And I do want to ask you this. The reputation is in business, it's so much easier to move on a dime. You can control things. Yes. Government is so bureaucratic. Give us a little bit of an insight. Is it harder to get things done? Has it been frustrating at times?
It is. There is a reason for that. And I'll get into that in a second. I think my transition was a lot easier because I was used to being in the public eye. I think if I hadn't been that way, it would have been very difficult to have your life scrutinized and to have people always talking about you. I was kind of already used to it. So, the main thing is you just for me, you have to act with integrity. And what I mean by that is you have to believe in what you're doing and act in that way. And you can't really listen to what people say, because you're always going to have naysayers. You're always going to have people that disagree with you. But as long as you're acting according to your principles, that's what you have to deal with. It is true that government does move slow. Especially when compared to the private sector. There is a reason for that. In the private sector, if you're a business owner, you're literally a dictator, right? You're the person that says, this is what we're going to do, and do it. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the best way to run a business. I do think that you have to have everybody on board, but ultimately you make the decision, and that's it. If you're, if you have stakeholders or stockholders, you answer to them. If you have your own business, if you're a sole proprietor, you answer to you. In government, you're answering to 450,000 people in the county. And there has to be more transparency, and there has to be more checks and balances. And that's really the reason that government moves slower is yes, you have some layers of bureaucracy, but you also have the fact that you want to ensure that everybody has input, because there are so many people that have a vested interest, and you want to make sure that the process is as transparent as possible. In the private sector, again, as long as what you're doing isn't illegal, you can sign a contract with anyone you want, doesn't matter, all those sorts of things, right? In the public sector, there's a lot more restrictions on that, because we want to ensure that everything is being done in the best interest of the taxpayers and everything is transparent. So for those two reasons, the fact that you want to ensure that everybody has a say, or at least has their opinion, the opportunity for their opinion to be heard, as well as absolute transparency as much as you can provide, it does move slower than the private sector.
That's very well said. I've never heard it explained quite like that. And you talk about transparency. That's actually something I want to get to maybe in the next segment, because I know you're really big on transparency. I know your predecessor was also big on transparency.
You have to be.
Yeah. But, you ran a campaign, Mayor Jacobs, on fiscal conservatism and individual freedom. And the Knox County budget that was passed last summer was a staggering $853 million, but without any tax increases. You were able to get approved funding for 3 new schools, a 4% raise for teachers, and a 6% raise for Knox County Sheriff's deputies. Will you be able to maintain adding raises in schools without additional tax increases?
Yeah, we believe so. When we look at schools, of course, and we look at our capital budget, those are things that are really, over the long term. We look at, I would rather invest in people than I would buildings. I will say that, and I think that a lot of times
I completely agree with
government, what we do is we tend to say, hey, there's really cool, we just built this thing. Well, why don't we make sure that we have good people? We've been very fortunate with our financial situation here in the county. The reason, it drives me nuts that the budget grows, but the reason the budget's growing is because the county's growing. Just population is growing. Our revenue is increasing, and we do have infrastructure needs. We have school needs. So I try to look at it more as, what is our spending per capita doing? And as long as that's, you're going to see growth in the budget just because, again, the population growth. What we don't want to see is staggering increases in spending per capita, or, of course, tax increases.
Sure. I think spending per capita is a great way to look at that. Now, the opioid crisis has been at epidemic proportions and increasing numbers of people affected by it. What are some of the things the county is doing to combat the opioid crisis?
When I first came into office, Mayor O'Hara and I launched an initiative, it's a joint city-county initiative called All for Knox. The website is allforknox.org. We had a summit to bring people from different sectors of our community, obviously the governmental sector, law enforcement, but also the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and the faith-based community, to bring them all together to talk about this issue and to figure out ways that within their own sectors they could play a role, and then to develop a plan as a community that we can follow going forward. The health department has taken the lead. We have the Metro Drug Coalition, of course, plays a huge part, but our health department has also taken the lead. They have now a position that is dedicated. It's I believe it's the opioid, the substance misuse response coordinator, and then their job is specifically to deal with this issue, to look at best practices across the country, and to kind of take the lead on this All for Knox initiative. I also think that the faith-based community has a huge role to play. There's an organization called the Knox County Church Network that is a number of churches that have gotten together, pooled their resources. Later this year, they will hopefully be opening an intensive faith-based outpatient therapy center, as well as some other initiatives that they're involved in. So really, I think the key to combating the substance misuse epidemic, unfortunately, what we've done up until this point is we've said, law enforcement, it's your problem. Arrest people and throw them in jail. That hasn't worked. I think what we have to do is leverage all the sectors of the community and all the resources that we have, and do a better job of coordinating and working together in those areas.
When it comes to outreach like that, with especially the faith-based nonprofits, talk about the balance and the importance. I mean, I think we as citizens, those of us that are in faith-based churches, whatever we're involved in, I think we really could be doing a lot more than we do. I think we have an obligation to do more than as if you look at the numbers, it's just not where I think it should be. Talk about the balance of where you think things should be handled versus, by the nonprofits versus the government having to step in and do a lot of this, because nonprofits typically can be a lot more efficient with the dollars.
Right. To me, I think the balance should be on the nonprofits and the faith-based community. When we look at government, I think too often we think of government as having a magic wand that can just fix stuff, and government can't. I mean, we're populated by human beings. Government has the power to tax, and the government has the power to make laws and say you can't do this and you have to do that. We can't change hearts and minds. And when we look at the substance misuse epidemic, whether you're talking about the faith-based community or just private sectors, it is an issue of hearts and minds, and how do we keep people out of the destructive cycle of addiction to begin with, and then if they fall into it, how can we help them become productive people again? We can do some stuff as government, and we're trying to do that. But certainly, I think a lot of it is stuff that the nonprofits and the faith-based community are going to be much better at than government is going to be able to do.
And even with all community outreach,
absolutely,
I think the nonprofits can be more efficient with dollars.
Yeah. And the thing about nonprofits is they are competing in a market. People have a choice of what to support and to say, I like this organization. They do a good job. I like the work that they're doing. If another organization isn't, they have to figure out a way to up their game, or they cease being a viable alternative. So when we look at nonprofits in that way, there are market forces at work, and hopefully the folks that are doing the best work and the best organizations will rise to the top.
Absolutely. We're visiting with Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs this morning. When we come back, we're going to talk about economic growth. We're going to talk about all the flooding. We're going to talk about and what we're doing about our road systems in the areas that are potentially prone to flooding. We're going to get into job creation. We got a lot of great stuff, so be sure to stay tuned as you listen to More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
You are listening to More Living with Jim Brogan. During the week, Jim is a financial advisor, an author and speaker with an MBA from the University of Tennessee, who specializes in helping people in or near retirement plan for the next phase of their lives. You can reach Brogan Financial during the week at 865-862-6800 or on the web at broganfinancial.com. And now, here's Senior Market Advisor Magazine's 2011 National Advisor of the Year and host of More Living, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm your host, Jim Brogan, and we're visiting with Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs. He's been on the job for about a year and a half now, hard to believe. And we're hearing about his experience and about all the different things we're accomplishing in this area. Knoxville, the county and the city are just doing so well, and it's great to hear his perspective and the things that they're working on to grow. I do want to mention, I got to say, I'm so glad the sun is out today.
Yeah,
holy cow. I mean, holy cow. So we have had, of course, we had record flooding last year. I've been here all my life. I've never seen like what we had last year. Now we're having more flooding this year. The winters have just, oh my goodness. Schools are being canceled. Roads have been impassable. There's even been a death in floodwaters last winter. So how is Knox County addressing the areas that are repeatedly being hit by the flooding?
Right. I think one thing we have to keep in mind, unfortunately, is like last year, it was just it was unprecedented, and again, this year it's been a lot of rain. So, Mother Nature is working against us in that respect. With our capital plan this year in Public Works and Engineering, we've done a flood study, based off of what happened last year, and a consultant comes in and, looks at things that we can do, and that's still being finalized. But Public Works and Engineering does have some capital requests in this year's budget that we should be able to fund to help alleviate funding. It's been, Bluegrass Lake on Twitter. I posted what they were doing out there. We rented some enormous pumps from First Utility District, who was good enough to work with our guys, Public Works and Engineering, but basically to move about 15 million gallons a day of water out of Bluegrass Lake into Fort Loudon Lake to keep the water levels low there. And the reason for that is because the existing infrastructure is just undersized now for the amount of water in the lake. We've also had issues in Powell and North Knoxville with Beaver Creek. When again, this is something that there's no like snap your fingers and fix it. But we do have some ideas, and the Engineering Public Works is very good at their job, has some recommendations for things that they would like to do over the next year to hopefully help alleviate some of this. And then hopefully, again, we don't see the abnormal rainfall every year like we have the past couple.
Well, and as you said, last year, it was an anomaly.
It was.
Yes. I've been here my whole life.
I think last year was a 500-year flood, I believe.
Yeah.
But don't quote me on that, but I think that's...
And then it was bad last week, but it wasn't. Yeah. It didn't get nearly to the levels.
And unfortunately what happens, of course, and this is the really sad part, is, the people... that get hit once and they're in a flood-prone area, well, then they're the ones that are getting hit again after they've just gotten everything cleaned up and in many cases almost gotten their lives back together. So it is, it's a tragedy for some of the individuals that have been hit in the flood areas.
Sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that there's a plan moving forward how to, like you say, you can't just snap your fingers. Probably going to have to be some development over a long period of time.
Right. I'm not quite sure. This will be in this coming budget, and I'm not quite sure how long it's going to take to execute it. But like I said, with Bluegrass Lake, ultimately the fix is extremely expensive and would take us working with the city and the state. So we need to look at some other things that we can do in the meantime to help mitigate the problem.
Now, what would be your perspective, Mayor Jacobs, on the roads? Because of all the flooding, our roads just seems like there's so many potholes, and I know that's not necessarily all on your plate, but right. What's your perspective on that?
I've learned more about potholes and sinkholes and all that stuff than I ever wanted to know in my entire life. And one thing that was really exciting yesterday is I was at Engineering Public Works and I got to see the Pavement Inventory van. And what Engineering Public Works has done is they're contracting with a company that has this van, super high tech. It has all these lasers and different things to measure the pavement on virtually every mile of road in Knox County. And it will go around and map it all, and then over the next several years, it will keep a running inventory of the quality of the road so that we can make better decisions about road maintenance and about paving. What happens with potholes is just the water gets under the asphalt. It brings the surface up, and then it breaks down. And sometimes these potholes can happen literally in a matter of minutes. And like on 640, 640, by the way, is a state road. Someone asked me one day, so what do you get about 640? I was like, it's a state road. I wish I could do something. They're like, well, tell the governor to do something. I'm like, oh, okay. And that's just, sometimes an issue too, is we have to work with TDOT on the highways, like Kingston Pike is a state road, and we work with them on the maintenance, but we have to work with them on stuff. Overall, and I know some people in parts of the county aren't going to believe this, but our roads are actually in very good shape, especially when you look at other parts of the country. That doesn't mean that we don't need to do better, because we do.
But collectively,
actually, our roads are in.
It's easy to know when there's one spot and we hit it, and then dadgummit.
Right. But looking at the future, and as we see, we all know the county's going to continue to grow. That's something that we do have to keep in mind is our future infrastructure, our future roads. We're in the process of looking at all of our planning and doing a master transportation plan to help us determine where best to utilize our dollars. And it really does it comes down to, we have a limited budget for these things, and where do we prioritize, and where do we ensure that we get the most bang for the buck for the most people in Knox County?
Now, let's talk about economic development. You've talked about wanting to keep it in Knox County compact. The economic development plan hadn't been reviewed in 19 years, and you promote a simplified growth plan that allows Knox County to have more governance over land use.
Right.
What are your objectives in the economic development plan?
Well, for our planning as far as our infrastructure and roads, when we're looking at the general plan and schools, in the county outside of the city limits, currently it's very difficult for cluster development. It's very difficult for town centers, like when we see North Shore Town Center, that's actually in the city because of the way our zoning works. And so our hope is to be able to get more dense development where the infrastructure would support it, including retail, including commercial. And hopefully that also eliminates some of the sprawl that we're concerned about. When we look at our actual economic development and how our job picture, I was decided it's an organization, it's a nonprofit. It's called the Electric Power Research Institute. They have 3 locations. One of them is here in Knoxville. It's mind-blowing what they are doing out there. They are doing research on everything from solar panels to LED lighting to smart devices and they're basically experimenting with water heaters, smart water heaters, and washing machines and dryers. They're even growing food using hydroponics and figuring out how light impacts plants and how you can best have food production. When we look at where the global economy is going, an organization like that is extremely important to us because, you have the National Lab, you have TVA, you have UT. I would really like to see us become a center for innovation, a center for energy, for clean energy, frankly, because that's the way that everything's going. And I think that we have the existing institutional infrastructure with RNL, with UT, with TVA, to really make that come to fruition. And that's good for everybody. Those are really high paying jobs. It's on the cutting edge of the global economy. And then of course all the ancillary businesses and jobs that creates. And I think that, and I've said this for even before I got in office, when you look at the package that East Tennessee has with brain power and with institutions, we rival any place in the world. We rival Silicon Valley. We rival the Research Triangle. We just don't market ourselves like that. And I think we have to do a much better job of talking about all the things that we have here and become more active in telling these companies, and of course the existing companies that are already here, this is the place to be. And if you're in the innovation sector of the economy, you want to be in Knox County, you want to be in East Tennessee.
Yeah, that's a great message. Very well said. We're visiting with Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs. When we come back, what about our investment into kids and with literacy? It's awesome what's going on here that's being led by Knox County. So don't go away. We'll also have our dollars and cents segment. Will the economy in 2020 survive the politics in the election in 2020? So you won't want to miss that. Don't go away as you listen to More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
His weekly radio show, television news appearances, and adult education classes taught at the University of Tennessee and Pellissippi State Community College, Jim taps into his extensive knowledge and experience to address issues important to living your best retirement. Join Jim every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI, and visit him online at broganfinancial.com. And now, here's the host of More Living, Jim Brogan.
Thanks for tuning in. This is More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI, and we're visiting with Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs, and we're talking about the development and growth of Knoxville. I want to talk about how we're investing in our kids and literacy in this area. However, before we get back to Mayor Jacobs, it is time for dollars and cents.
Want to be sure you are getting the most out of your retirement? For all the years of your retirement? That's the primary goal of More Living with Jim Brogan and our Dollars and Cents segment, where we provide you with an important financial tip that will help positively impact the quality of your life in retirement. And now, here's Jim with this week's Dollars and Cents tip.
Will the economy in 2020 survive the politics of an election year? That's my topic for today in Dollars and Cents. You know, that's one of the biggest factors that I think is going to lead to volatility in the markets this year. There's a couple of others. There's an ongoing tug of war between the financial markets and the Federal Reserve. I am concerned about production in China affected by the coronavirus, so there are some global factors that could come into play. But how might politics this year affect your money? And that's what I want to talk about. You know, I've done segments before on how politics affect the markets, and when we look at it historically, politics really, other than with some short-term gyrations, really don't have a meaningful impact on markets. The one thing I'm confident of is that markets do like a divided government. So if we have one party in the presidency, the markets like to see at least one of the houses of Congress be in the other party because of the checks and balances that are in place. So as a rule, the markets have liked that. But in the past, the politics of which office has the Congress versus which has the presidency really hasn't had a long-term meaningful impact. However, I do think maybe that's somewhat different this year because I think we're coming up on a very pivotal election in the sense that there's really at a bigger level, there seems to be an ongoing critical point in our road where we're deciding in many ways between capitalism and socialism and the different approaches to what our future needs to be and how everything is run in the United States of America. And those two choices are so radically different that the outcome could absolutely have an effect on markets. But we really never know. And if there continues to be a divided government, how much actual radical change will happen? It's hard to say. So how does it affect your money and what should you be doing? Well, I think the key is if you have the right financial plan, and if you're retired or almost retired, one of the key elements of that is where do you draw your income from? You know, so many people draw their income across all their investments. And that means that when their investments are down substantially, which inevitably they will eventually be, they're selling off investments when they're down and they're spending that money for income. And that can be catastrophic. See, it's okay to sell something when it's down and reinvest, but you never want to sell when it's down and spend it. Yet if you're living across on all of your investments and you're selling investments that go up and down in value, then when they're down, you're going to be really compounding the problem. And the first 5 years of retirement has a very disproportionate effect on your long-term outcome in retirement. It affects over 50% of your result over a 30-year retirement. Over 50% is determined potentially in the first 5 years. Well, what if you retire into the teeth of a bear market with all this volatility and concerns and all these things going on? We've got almost 11 years, longest bull market run in history. So in the next 5 years, we're probably going to have a bear market. And if you don't have a financial plan that can deal with that, where you're allowing your risk investments to ride through that downturn and have time to recover. You don't lose too much, and you therefore have time to recover. You've got to have an income plan that can support that. And then whether the bear market happens next year or this year or in 3 years, if you're focusing your longer term, your risk investments on 7-8 years from now, well, it doesn't matter if it's next year or in 3 years, and you don't have to worry about trying to time the market, because I'm very confident that if you try to time the market, it's the devil's folly. So, no matter what happens in November, do I think there might be long-term implications? Yes. But there are so many things that are riding on that, and so many things that could affect that, like a divided Congress, So don't just make a knee-jerk reaction and panic and do something dramatic. Instead, you should have a plan that allows you to focus on the long term with your risk investments and draw certainty of income from safe and stable investments in the early years of retirement. And you can have a plan that can largely insulate yourself from the potential volatility of the markets in this crazy political climate.
That's our Dollars and Cents segment for this week. You can find this week's Dollars and Cents segment and others by visiting BroganFinancial.com.
And I'd urge you to go to BroganFinancial.com and check us out. Also, my upcoming 2-part adult education class, Thrive Financially in Retirement, is at Pellissippi State Hardin Valley. 2-2-hour sessions. If you're retired or nearing retirement, it's for you. It's March the 3rd and 10th, coming up here in about a week and a half. March the 3rd and 10th. 2-2-hour sessions. You can go to PellissippiRetirementPlanning.com. You can download a syllabus. I've got a short video, and you can click to register. Also, you can find out all of my classes for the spring. You go to BroganFinancial.com, click on classes, and I've got another class in Blount County in April, and then I'll be back at University of Tennessee downtown in May. And the whole goal there with the class, with my show, with my podcast, with all of the blogs that I post is to give you information so you can make informed and prudent decisions that can impact the quality of your life. Now, this morning, we're visiting with Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs, and we're talking about his first year and a half in office and where we've been and where we're heading. And
Jim, can I interrupt for a second? If you don't mind, I'm sorry. Since we're talking about finances and investments, one thing that I've found pretty fascinating is the municipal bond and the tax-free market. And the fact that, I know it might be a little dry, but there is such appetite and such demand right now for tax-free bonds, and that's been extremely beneficial. For instance, Knox County has a AA+ rating, but that's been extremely beneficial for us because we're able to get money virtually interest-free at this point. It's, and I don't know what you're seeing. I guess you're seeing the same thing in the overall muni market and tax-free market.
Well, sure. The big key there is it is a great thing. Knox County has a very high rating, as Mayor Jacobs said. It's a big part of your tax planning of the best way to structure municipal bonds and whether you do an individual bond or a bond fund, because individual bonds, you have a date in the future, you're guaranteed principal back, whereas a bond fund, you don't have that guarantee. So, there's pros and cons to both of those, and then there's also significant tax planning opportunities with those.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Good answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about our kids. Only 40% of Knox County students are reading on grade level by the 3rd grade. Read City USA is an initiative that you have undertaken in conjunction with dozens of community partners. Tell our listeners about Read City USA.
Well, I would encourage everybody to please go to readcityusa.com to learn more about the program. We're actually doing better here in Knox County than the rest of the state of Tennessee is. Across the state of Tennessee, only about 33% of our 3rd graders are reading at grade level. That means they comprehend at a 3rd grade level. The reason that statistic is so important is because 3rd grade is when kids switch from learning to read to reading to learn. And if you're behind at 3rd grade, it's going to be very hard to catch up, which unfortunately produces some negative outcomes potentially over the rest of a student's life. So Read City USA is an effort to get folks excited about reading and involved in reading as a family. It's really easy to participate in. If you have a Knox County Library card, go to your smartphone, download the Beanstack Tracker app and register using Knox County Library card, and then just log your reading. And we're keeping a cumulative total on the Read City USA website. And this year we're going to read 500,000 hours as a community, which is 20 times around the world. We have some prizes and milestones and celebrations that we do along the way. And really just trying, again, just to get people excited about reading and just, get folks reading, which with all the distractions that we have in entertainment now, I think that I think that's one of the kind of root causes of why we don't read as much. And unfortunately, our young people aren't as proficient in many cases as they should be.
Now, what about the school system? I mean, in terms of how it comes into play and what we're doing at the kindergarten, first, second grade level.
And one of the important parts about Reach USA is it's actually the pre-kindergarten level. We're our schools do a really good job, but frankly, as families, we have to be involved in the education of our young people, especially before they go to school.
Yeah, there really should be a good foundation there before they go to kindergarten.
And that's the issue. If they have the foundation when they're coming into kindergarten, they're much more likely to do better. And studies show, this is stuff that sounds crazy, but it's true. Children that are read to even before they're born, when they're still in their mother, they actually end up doing better, with reading scores and all that sort of stuff. So, again, with the Read City USA program, it's designed, not only to work with schools, but actually outside of schools and with the families, to encourage families to read, especially at the younger age levels.
We're going to get to our last break. When we come back with Mayor Glen Jacobs, we're going to talk about his view on the partisan political issues that we've got going on in Washington and why he is so passionate about affecting politics at the local level and why he believes that is maybe the best place to make an impact. We'll also talk about his new book that's coming out, Mayor Kane. That will be interesting, so don't go away. We're listening to More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Thank you for listening to More Living with Jim Brogan. If you miss any of today's show or want to listen to it again, visit BroganFinancial.com, where you can access the podcast and other educational materials to help you in your journey through retirement. And now, here's Senior Market Advisor Magazine's 2011 National Advisor of the Year and host of More Living, Jim Brogan.
Thanks for tuning in this morning to News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Do check us out on our website, BroganFinancial.com. By the way, we put out a weekly e-newsletter, an e-blast, with links to all of the content we've posted for that week. Our Dollars and Cents podcast, our radio show. There'll be a link to this show with Mayor Glen Jacobs. We'll have our Retirement Minute, new blog postings. I had a Q&A just a couple weeks ago on the new Secure Act to help answer your questions about how your retirement accounts are going to be affected by the new law signed by President Trump right before Christmas. It's a great way to keep in touch. And of course, you can also see our schedule for our upcoming classes. It also gives you the opportunity, if you like, you can sign up for a free consultation. We are, of course, a fee-based firm, and that also requires us to act in a fiduciary capacity for our clients, which means we have to act solely in your best interest. But just take advantage of the information regardless, so you can make informed and prudent decisions. We're visiting with Knoxville Mayor Glen Jacobs, Knox County Mayor, and talking about all the great things that are going on. One thing I want to mention, I talked in my Dollars and Cents segment, Mayor, about the political climate. And, in a recent Sports Illustrated article, you talk about the partisan political climate. And your view is one of trying to find common ground first. And Washington politicians, I think, could definitely use that advice. How do you maintain that focus when everyone, it seems like in this society, in this time, is so quick to disagree on even the smallest things?
Yeah. That is an issue, especially, you look at, you can put the most innocuous thing out on Facebook or Twitter, and all of a sudden, people are, jumping all over you, or, just whatever, taking the opposite side of an argument that you really, why would anyone even do that other than just be adversarial? And that's very sad. And of course, when we look at national politics and with the presidential race, it's just, it goes up to another level. I'm a Republican, and for me, the message of the Republican Party should be about free markets, and it should be about opportunity that's available in those markets. And I think that's something that brings everybody together. And I think that's where we all should start, is something that brings us together. it's an optimistic message. You know, when we look at Ronald Reagan, it's Ronald Reagan's message. It's morning in America. What I see now is I see divisiveness. I see everybody starting out where they disagree, and I see pessimism, and I see in many cases just straight up hatred. That's not something.
In Washington, it seems to be everywhere on both sides. I mean,
it's horrible. It's horrible, and I think that overall, the cable news channels make a lot of money off of it. The political pundits make a lot of money off of it, and the politicians certainly rally their bases around it. But it doesn't help our country. And I think one of the great things about it, local politics, is a lot of that can be left to the side. You know, we can talk about the things that we all want: good infrastructure, good schools, safe neighborhoods. Those are things that resonate whether you're Republican, a Democrat, or whatever. And that's one of the things I really love about local politics. And I think that many of our national politicians could really learn and take a lesson from local politics, how they go about things.
It's a lot more civil, isn't it?
It sure is, again, because, we look at the issues and say, we might have a different idea of how to get there, but we all want the same thing, right?
And in politics, compromise has become such a bad word now.
Well, it has, and it's not. I don't even think it's compromise. It's just dialogue. It's just talking and saying, this is what we all want to achieve. How do we get there? Well, that doesn't happen. It's, there must be some ulterior motive that you have, and I hate you.
Well, there's so many conflicts now in the system and power and all the things that go with it. It's interesting to talk to your predecessor after being in Washington for a year.
Oh, yeah. And poor Tim, he's, he got thrown into it, and it's even, inter party. There's just, Washington is broken. I heard someone put it the best that we expect Washington to do stuff. At this point, they can't even fix a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah, I'd say that's about the truth. Hey, real quickly, Mayor Jacobs, talk to us about the importance in your mind of career and technical education.
It's hugely important. We made a decision as a country a couple decades ago that every student had to go to a 4-year school to become successful. And education is extremely, extremely important. 4-year colleges are a very important part of that, but the trades are very important as well. And not everybody has to go to college to be successwe For some people, it's going to an apprenticeship program. For some people, it's going to certification and getting into a trade. So we have really neglected those young people, and frankly, people that are switching careers when we look at training and education and job and career opportunities.
And there's some great opportunities in trade and some overlooked things where people have great careers in trade.
Right now, I think that the trades are where it's at. For every 4 skilled tradespeople that are leaving the workforce, there's only one person to replace them. And we see it all over the place. I mean, if you wonder why the price of housing is going up, part of the reason is because the price of labor is going up, which is great if you're one of those people that's getting paid to build a house or to work on a car or to be a welder or many of these other things. I really believe that is where it's at right now.
Now, Mayor, I've only got about 45 seconds, but tell us about Mayor Kane, the book.
Sure. That actually came out in November of last year, so it's out right now. But it's just my life story. It's an autobiography. Talk a lot about wrestling, a little bit about politics, and a little bit about my role as mayor. So I think it's a good read. I mean, it's the best book that I've ever written, so I'm really proud of it.
Talk about that process. Was it hard to do that, or did you have help? I mean, did it come together pretty well?
I mean, my degree's in English, so I'm kind of a writer by nature. For something like that's different, because you want to get the book out there. You want people to enjoy it and read it. So I did have some help with editorial decisions and a little bit with content, just as far as what I think is a funny story, or in many cases what I thought was rather mundane, other people thought really funny or entertaining, so I would include that. Overall, the process is really, really good. That was cool.
Well, Knox County Senator, or excuse me, golly, I've got my tongue tied. Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs, thank you for your service and for all that you're doing. Best of luck over the next 2.5 years. I know that we'll be having you on again to get more updates, but thank you for your service, and we wish you the best of luck as Knox County and Knoxville continue to grow.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it.
Great to have you with us. That's Knox County Mayor Glen Jacobs. Great to have him on and take time out of his busy schedule. Do check us out online, broganfinancial.com. If you missed the whole interview, we'll have it up on our podcast page by at least Tuesday, probably actually by Monday. Thank you for tuning in. We've discussed a greater community, because a greater community provides for more living so you can live the best years of your life. Thank you for tuning in. It's More Living with Jim Brogan on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.